Welcome back to Bills and Business, the podcast where we connect Texas lawmakers, industry leaders, and business experts to key issues shaping Texas' business and legislative landscape. I'm your host, Laura Carr, co-founder of USLege, and today I'm excited to welcome AJ Rodriguez, Executive Vice President of Texas 2036. AJ brings decades of leadership experience from public and private sectors, and now is head of strategic initiatives for the think tank, Texas 2036. Well, AJ, thank you for being on the podcast.
No, thank you, Laura.
I so appreciate your time.
Forward to it.
Coming on.
For
those who don't know you, I would love to hear more about your background. I know, but if you want to share a little bit more about yourself.
No, happy to. Born and raised in San Antonio, a lifelong Texan, and went to UTSA, got my BBA and MBA there. Cut my teeth in chamber work, working as an intern for Joe Cryer, who was the president at the time, and he was working as a commissioner on the Texas Higher Education Coordinating Board, so supporting a lot of the work that he did there. And that got my involvement with chamber work, which has continued to this day, as you know.
Sure.
Involved with the Texas Association of Business. And then I had the opportunity to run the Hispanic Chamber in San Antonio, and I was recruited to be Deputy City Manager for Cheryl Scully back in 2008. And then went on to work in the corporate sector for about almost 10 years for a pretty significant engineering procurement construction firm here in Texas, Zachary Engineering.
Okay. Or
Zachary Industrial, rather. And so worked with them for about that time before being recruited by Margaret Spellings, our former CEO, who was former U.S. Secretary of Education to George W. Bush. And so it was a delight to come on board. I really saw this as an opportunity to work for an incredibly noble endeavor, and the opportunity to move the needle on lots of issues and be on the offensive side of the equation in many respects. So it's been terrific. It's been a terrific experience.
So AJ, you serve as Executive Vice President at Texas 2036. It's a very well-known organization here in Texas, but for those who don't, do you mind sharing a little bit about it?
Sure. Well, we're very proud of the organization that I work with, nonprofit, nonpartisan public policy shop that's focused on improving lives and opportunities for all Texans. And we do that using data is our major thrust to drive policy solutions. We really want to be seen as a trusted resource for the legislature. And we were initiated by Tom Luce in 2016. Tom was famous for saying, without data, you're just another person with an opinion. And with the population growth that we're experiencing, having being at 30 million people now and projecting 2 to 5 million people in the future, we felt like we've got to get Texas ready to sustain this Texas miracle that we've been so fortunate to experience. And many of the ways in which to do that is to focus on the areas where the state works, which is in education and healthcare, natural resources, infrastructure, justice and safety, and government performance, which essentially outline our 6 pillars that we are focused in on to ensure that Texas remains a thriving place to live and work and raise a family.
I love it. Well, it's a great mission. And I know you have a more unique origin story. Could you share that with us?
Well, sure. So as I mentioned, Tom Luce, who's a longtime Dallas business and civic servant, we like to say he's a serial social entrepreneur. He's founded several organizations like ours in the past. And really he saw a need and somewhat a polarization that was occurring at the national and state level with politics, and felt like a data-driven organization could be a place, a trusted, valued resource for legislators and the public alike to be able to look to for answers in terms of what are the facts, and then be able to make decisions on those facts in the policy realm, again, to move the needle, and to also demonstrate there were some areas of need in different places. So within education, for instance, our reading levels were, about half our kids weren't reading at grade level, for instance, at the time that we were looking at some of the data. And so this compelled not only Tom, but our 36-member board of directors, now 34, but at the time it was 36, to essentially establish this comprehensive set of goals that are outlined in what we call our strategic framework. for the state. And I've gone around the state asking if there's anything close to that, that comprehensive and that long-term in nature. We haven't found anything like it yet. So that definitely is a differentiator in terms of the kinds of goals that drive our everyday operation and our work in these several areas in our legislative agenda that we'll outline shortly.
So some Texas 2036, the name of that, is that because of the board members? I heard you say, or it's the date and time?
So the 2036 specifically refers to our 200-year birthday for the state that we're embarking upon here. So founded in 2016, this is a 20-year program of work, which to me really creates this innate sense of urgency about getting things done every single session. And for our team, every single session is really iterative, and it's in the process, right? So each session builds upon the previous session in terms of the work that we're doing. At the same time, our board's going to have some decision making to make about. People often ask, well, what happens after 2036? Okay. And so one of the things that we're contemplating is, we set up all this infrastructure and resource around this. So is that merely a branding exercise that we think about, or is it something more substantive? So we have some time to think about that, but in the meantime, we're trying to get things done between now and then and create that sense of urgency to make it happen.
Absolutely. And you mentioned the nonpartisan piece to this, and we'll definitely jump into some of your legislative priorities as an organization. Is everything that you work on at Texas 2036 something you would consider nonpartisan across the board?
I think everything that we work on, again, focuses on improving lives for all Texans. And so that shouldn't be a Republican or a Democratic issue, a partisan issue. So again, we try to really focus on what we like to think of as meat and potato issues in many ways, and making the case for those items that can make a significant difference. Just to give you an example, I like to go around the state and ask about pension reform. Our staff, our policy team specifically, worked last couple of sessions before this last session on trying to reform pension reform. And as a result of some of the policy work that we did and working with our legislators, they deserve the credit in terms of actually passing all the legislation we wanted to be a resource to them. The state legislature will have saved all Texans, $35 billion, or $40 billion rather, over the next 35 years. So that's a substantive deal for taxpayers, and it's something that you don't often hear about or read about in the news, but we like to think about our work truly making that impactful difference. And I can tell similar stories around, a permanent school fund, for instance, that our team worked on. I think we were one of the sole testimonials at one of the committee hearings on the permanent school fund, which will save the state we estimated at the time $100 million a year, over the life of that program permanently. But what we're now anticipating is that's going to save, close to $250 million, over the life of that program as well. So that's the kind of work that we're focused on, is working on these issues that matter to all Texans, and doing so in a way that really brings folks from both sides across the aisle. I'll just make the one last example,
sure,
and that's HB8, which is our community college finance reform work that we put an extraordinary amount of focus on in terms of producing the data, producing a tool that essentially allowed different community colleges to go in and see what the financing structure would look like on an outcomes-based system, versus an enrollment-based system, and also work with the commission that was headed up by Woody Hunt. Those commission recommendations went through their process largely unchanged, and ultimately were passed by the House 142-0 and the Senate 31-0, and signed by the governor. And now it's one of the most innovative, extraordinary programs of its kind across the entire country. And that was here initiated in Texas. And I think it's going to produce some significant results for many years to come. And I like to point to that when we're out in the public to demonstrate that bipartisanship is not just a possibility, but a reality. and that our legislators also need to get credit for when they get things like that right in that way.
Absolutely. So much divides everybody, especially when you look at headline news. And there's so much in this Texas legislature that does pass unanimously, bipartisanly. So I love that. That is wonderful. Do you think, I know you've spoken a lot with me about your policy experts at Texas 2036, and you have an amazing team that seem to believe, with my data that I'm looking at, have testified more than any other organization, I think. So
hundreds of times.
Yes,
right.
Hundreds. So can you speak a little bit more about your
team? It's definitely one of our incredible assets is the team that we've assembled that come from all backgrounds, both sides of the aisle, but more importantly have had in some shape or form some legislative and government experience, right? Some of whom have been, we have 4 chiefs of staffs that have worked at in the legislative body. We have as well someone that's worked in the governor's office, someone that's worked in the lieutenant governor's office. They also come from different backgrounds and careers. We have 4 teachers, on our team as well. So, we're very proud of the group that we've assembled in terms of the capability to go out and, again, support the research and the policy solutions for these issues in which they are experts. I often say that they've forgotten more than I'll ever know about their specific subject matter area that they work on. But in addition to that policy team, we also have a pretty significant presence with our data team in terms of the work that they're doing, coordinating with our policy team, and of course our communications team. This is the programmatic areas that are all in our Austin office. Essentially, I had a former boss that used to say, you got to plan on doing good things, you got to do good things, and then you got to tell people you did those good things in order to keep doing those good things. And that's kind of the story of what we're trying to achieve with the organization. And as a result of that, in terms of our engagement, not just with the legislature, but with the public and with our contributors, we're trying to build this this movement and really momentum in civic demand for these issues that matter to all Texans as well.
Oh, I love it. And some of those that definitely resonated with me were the workforce development. Mm-hmm. I know you're very big into that topic. If you want to dive in a little to your legislative priorities.
No, definitely. So, in terms of college and career and college readiness, we're really trying to emphasize the upward mobility, right? The ability to have this seamless pipeline of individuals that get the right level of education, the right credentials to be able to seamlessly move into the workforce, into a family-sustaining wage, and therefore, ensure that our population, can sustain this economy that we've built over time, and the employers that are responsible for hiring this talent. So, we feel strongly that this $110 billion that is essentially supports education and workforce pipeline, we want to ensure that that's being used effectively and efficiently throughout the system. Our team, as I mentioned, this is an iterative process, and beginning with a lot of the reforms that were done with public school finance in HB3, ultimately led to some of the tri-agency work that we were engaged with in terms of ensuring that the 3 entities that are responsible for education and workforce in state government, TEA, the Workforce Commission, and the Coordinating Board all have a coordinated strategy moving forward on how to make sure that pipeline continues robustly, right? And then HB8 was this last, item that I mentioned earlier with community college finance reform. That's really going to leverage these 50 community college districts throughout the state, and the legislature put some significant funding into ensuring that would continue. $700+ million that is going into our community college system that wasn't there in the past to support these, incentivize this outcomes-based system. And this next kind of focus that we're going to have is on this, college and career readiness from the standpoint of ensuring that our students are prepared for these family sustained wage jobs, right? And also considering how do we redefine high school in a way that doubles down on their ability to, with existing programs like dual credit and internships and apprenticeships and P-Tech and a lot of things that the legislature has already put into place, but how do we scale that in a way that impacts more students in a profound manner in which they're able to achieve those types of opportunities and jobs? So that's our next really main focus. And there's a lot of strategies that go underneath that umbrella, for instance.
And we're in this new technological revolution happening. So I do feel that there's a lot. I'm glad you mentioned high schools doing some new training. How are y'all helping or proposing the legislature work on kind of changing some of the curriculum in high schools or changing in this time?
I think there's been quite a bit of emphasis and strengthening a lot of the reading materials that have been in the past, according to our policy folks, who have been really engaged in the high quality instructional material work that was put into place that the State Board of Education is also implementing. And I think this session, what we're really focusing in on is our math curriculum and trying to enhance that, and also the training that goes along with that, and supporting our teachers resource-wise in terms of being able to deliver on that promise for our students.
Of course, they have to learn some of the new things
That's
too,
right, exactly.
with workforce training. Have you done any diving into free workforce training throughout Texas and getting people ready across the board, kind of for different fields that are new and innovative?
Yeah, I mean, I think some of the things that we're emphasizing right now. This is a great shift into our water area in terms of what we're trying to do with water security in the future. There's a need for that workforce is aging, and we need to replenish that workforce. Just like we need to replenish our water supply as well. We need adequate water supply.
Absolutely.
And so part of it is our supply, but also our aging, deteriorating water infrastructure around the state. So we leak about the size of Lake Buchanan every single year because of our old pipes throughout the entire state. So we were very encouraged to hear from the leadership, the lieutenant governor rather, on their kind of emphasis on making water a strategic priority for this upcoming session. Obviously, we have been very engaged in that in terms of building a coalition of support around it with Texas Association of Business and with the Greater Houston Partnership, and with a number of Dallas Regional Chamber, a number of other partners as well that have been instrumental in trying to build the business case around water. It's a $150 billion problem. It's about $120 billion deficit in terms of our future funding. So we think that there needs to be a constitutionally dedicated funding stream, pun intended. You're welcome, Jeremy. He's got me used to these puns in water that we're trying to achieve.
Okay. And is part of this huge influx of people moving to Texas part of this shortage? I know that you mentioned aging infrastructure as well, which is natural, but
yeah, I mean, when we do some of these conversations around the state, we've got about 1,300 people moving to Texas every single day, are the estimates. And they're not bringing roads or energy or water or broadband or anything else with them. What they are bringing with them is they're a new resource for us. In addition to the people that we have here, we've got the ability, if we can ensure that our workforce is ready for this economy and these jobs, we have the ability to sustain this top 10 in the world economy going forward for many years to come. And that's why the things that we emphasize, whether it's education or, as you mentioned earlier, our workforce, our housing, some of the work that we're doing within childcare, all these work together. That's one of the things that our founder also emphasized was these things don't operate in silos, and it shouldn't be a zero-sum game for one versus the other, where one wins over the other. Water is really important, and energy reliability is really important, and education is really important. So how do we optimize our work around these issues? That's on the one hand. On the other hand, what I also appreciate about the work that we do in terms of its comprehensive approach is things like housing affordability, right? So housing affordability doesn't just impact housing affordability. Increasing density and lowering costs for people over time does impact housing affordability in terms of some of the regulatory work that we can do there to improve the system. But that also impacts mobility in terms of transportation. It impacts schools not necessarily closing inner city-wise and having to open other places. I often refer to my hometown, San Antonio, 500 million plus square miles. And then we have Austin that's 300 somewhat square miles, 500 square miles, not 500 million, 500 square miles and 300 square miles in terms of Austin. And so I think what's important is that the housing affordability can impact things like walkability and therefore healthcare. So those are the kinds of issues that we're focusing in on as well.
Now, in your paper that you sent me, you have different pillars of priorities, essentially. Right. So what are those, the ones we maybe haven't covered?
Sure. I think one of the ones that we haven't necessarily covered is childcare, and I'll also talk a little bit about some of the innovative work that we've been focused on in the past. We were very engaged in the 2023 session on some big down payments for Texas, right? So the $1 billion that was done for water, $1.5 billion that was done for broadband that leverages $3.3 billion in NTIA federal funding to expand broadband across the state, $1 billion for state parks. Those are some of the things that we were focused in on. The state's going to have a revenue surplus again, or experience of potentially a revenue surplus again this coming session. So there's another opportunity to work on issues like water, again, as I mentioned, and also just thinking about things like childcare and ensuring that the data exists. There's interoperability between the agencies to understand where the childcare system is, where the needs are, where the demand is, and how can we effectively deploy those resources in an efficient way, as well as government performance and trying to ensure that our government systems and data are, again, interoperable and working together to be more efficient for taxpayers and the consumer that's interfacing with those, right? So that's another focus area that we'll be working on. And then there's these kind of future of innovation work that we're doing within things like artificial intelligence. And there's opportunities there in terms of how the state uses artificial intelligence to become more efficient while also protecting data privacy as well, and potential cyber attacks. Right. So those are another area that I believe the legislature will be focused on. And then there are things like advanced air mobility that we are interested in, as well as the implementation of the Space Commission, a $350 million investment that the legislature made this last session, that will be working with the director there, Norman Garza, who's doing a great job and trying to ensure that we're working closely with them in that implementation, how that works, because it's projected to be $1 trillion industry at some point for our state, so we've got to focus in on that.
Norman's coming on the show in a couple weeks.
Oh, very good.
So yeah, he's great. Excited to hear what he's working on over there.
Excellent.
But, yeah, a lot of your issues are broad, but definitely hearing across the board, those are completely things that everybody would be on board with. What are some of the big solutions you see to the childcare, affordable housing side of things? There's so many people moving here. Prices are going up here in Austin, but what are you guys seeing as the main solutions to some of these issues?
The childcare one is such a complicated, most of these issues are really complicated, but the childcare issue is a complicated item. And part of what we've witnessed thus far is just this lack of data within the system, whether it's the Workforce Commission or some of the Health and Human Services, and whether or not those systems talk to each other. So we're going to be encouraging some of that work in terms of just understanding what the data looks like before, again, start with data before presenting those policy solutions. So I imagine this will be there'll be some things that come out that support trying to expand childcare, but we want to do it in a way that again is effective over the long term, right? Not just a Band-Aid type approach. And then in housing affordability, we think that there are a lot of regulatory barriers and items that we can focus in on. Local level, there are things that aren't uniform across different communities. Austin's done a good job recently of trying to relax some of those burdens, for instance, on lot sizes and how big lot sizes have to be for a single family home, and allowing for these. There's a rule at the state level in terms of voter petition, which allows 20% of the landowners around you, surrounding landowners, to petition for city council to take up a supermajority vote on something within your neighborhood, and so just providing for better access and zoning changes that could support casitas and ADUs, accessory dwelling units, being built in backyards to again expand the opportunity for more density, and eventually this is a supply and demand issue that can lower costs for everybody. So that's the intent of what we're trying to focus on housing affordability as well.
Absolutely, seeing so many of those ADUs pop up and all across Austin.
Well, you're probably seeing a lot of those structures that are 2 or 3 stories that are in these smaller lots, and I think that's also as a result of some of these zoning changes that are taking place, and that some of these new innovative techniques or housing structures, and also new materials that can be created. A lot of 3D printing that you're seeing now that can go up pretty quick. Those are particular opportunities for us that where the legislation or the regulatory environment should catch up with the technology and where it's going.
How have you seen Texas change the most over the last 10 years, do you think?
I just think the significant impact of our population growth. I mean, you see it everywhere. We've had the good fortune of our new president and CEO, David Lebron, who was head of RISE for 18 years. We've had the good fortune of touring the state over the last 6 months and introducing ourselves to different communities. And I think what you're seeing is just this extraordinary, development and growth and building, construction everywhere that's happening. I know that's tough. It is kind of a little bit like ripping off the Band-Aid here in many ways in terms of the way our growing pains are happening, and that I can see that continuing to happen. But we want to keep up from an infrastructure perspective, and that's not just physical capital, but also human capital. Right. And the growth that's happened within the Texas Triangle has accounted for a lot of that. So how we balance and harmonize between what happens in our urban centers of growth and that attractiveness to continue to make that happen while maintaining our focus on supporting our rural areas and those pieces that also have needs in a greater way, because we need those communities to thrive as well.
Absolutely. That's an interesting balance, because isn't it this stat 80% of people live in the Texas Triangle in Texas?
I think it might even be a little higher than that, but
wow.
but yeah, it's that's pretty close.
And then a lot of people from these more rural areas are moving to the Texas Triangle.
Yeah, I think the number I saw was 80 somewhat % of the growth has happened within the Triangle itself for Texas, the entire state.
Not great for our traffic.
Yeah,
it's okay.
Yeah, we're working on that, and that's the other thing. Going back to the Prop 1 and Prop 7 that supported a continuous stream of transportation funding. The legislature at that time saw a real need, addressed that need, and now there's funding. Now the work is in the implementation of that, right? And the actually getting the shovels in the ground and making all the work happen. And that's what we're seeing throughout. But what that certainty in funding does is provide ability to plan around it in a more intentional way. And that's what we're trying to create for water. As we think about the ability to plan for water infrastructure and our sustainability as a population.
Really important issues that you're working on, and we're coming up to this legislative session. How, especially in a presidential year, a heated election, very polarizing, how do you stay nonpartisan and get the work done across the board, even when there may be disagreements?
Well, our team, I'm just always so profoundly impressed with their ability to stay positive and focused. And part of that also is what they're seeing at the building, right? So coming back, they see this certain level of enthusiasm of this, let's get things done, this coming session. I think you're hearing that as well from different corners. I know a lot of what's seen in the majority of the public eye and what happens in the media mostly is some of the contentious issues that are part of the process that will probably always have been and always will be part of the process. But I think highlighting, and that's kind of the area that we like to focus in on, is highlighting that there are definitely opportunities where both sides of the aisle can work together, have worked together, and will continue to work together. And that's what keeps us very optimistic about the state and our work. And I think it's reflected in the results. We've had 120 plus pieces of legislation across the finish line that we've supported, that our legislature passed and worked together on. And again, we want to be a piece of that puzzle to help them solve and work through those issues. And again, I'm inspired every day through our team and their outlook and enthusiasm and getting ready for the next session. And by the way, they've been getting ready for the next session, since the end of last session or last session.
Absolutely.
So they've been at interim committee hearings and have been actively pursuing policy changes through the sunset review process, and now gearing up through the bill filing, et cetera. So they are engaged at every step of the way. And then the rest of our team, working in tandem into and of their own right, going out to the state and visiting with local officials and understanding, what's happening in their respective communities, so we're not making policy recommendations in a vacuum. We're doing that in coordination with these local communities, and we're building stronger relationships and partnerships with government officials and institutions. I think there's a real opportunity. We, as a collective team, following the vision of our new CEO, believe there's a real opportunity in pushing strategic partnerships with our universities across the state. These are research engines that we ought to be collectively harnessing the power of, and being a convener of such to activate that research at the Capitol.
Totally. And your issues are a broad range, and as well as they are equally important to your team. There's always one issue that's the real hot button one during session. What do you predict for this session is going to have your department, whether it's infrastructure or school funding and workforce? What do you think is going to be the big hot button issue this session?
I truly believe that we're going to make some real progress on the waterfront, to use another
Sure.
to use another
there you
term. I think we're going to make some real progress in water this session, and that's what our team has been working extraordinarily hard on. Jeremy Mazur, our senior policy advisor, has also been all over the state, has been in every single panel. He's been at the Capitol supporting this work, along with our senior VP of policy, John Horchuk, and trying to push on water and making sure that happens. So I think that's going to be one of the major areas of initiative and success at the end of the session. You've got to believe it
Yes.
in order to see it and have it happen. So we're looking forward to working on that issue even further. And I also take pride in the fact that there's lots of contentious issues out there, and we've got an incredible board of directors, 34 members on our board that span from Amarillo to El Paso to Laredo and McAllen to Beaumont, Port Arthur, and everywhere in between. I mean, we're really intentional about making sure our board is the face of our state, and they are so enthusiastically supportive of the way in which we engage. It's not just what we're doing, but how we're doing it, I think is just as important. And the thoughtfulness that our team members have in their engagement with the way in which they do their work, how they do their work, and their care and thought for one another in doing that work, I think is really extraordinary. So we are focused on the issues that really matter, again, to all Texans, underscore all, and we want to be part of that conversation and discussion.
We have a great mission. And how can people reach you and hear more about your work?
Well, we love for them to reach us at texas2036.org. That's where our website is, and we've got an email sign-up sheet that can update them via newsletter on the work that we're engaged in on a weekly basis. As I mentioned, our comms team does a fantastic job in terms of getting the data out there, and also the arguments for supporting this work. So would highly encourage them to sign up that way, and looking forward to working with you, Laura, and USLege.
Thank you.
You guys have done a great job as entrepreneurial spirit of Texas, and so looking forward to seeing that growth and working with you for many sessions to come.
Absolutely. 9 months in, I'm very excited about the more years and working with you. So absolutely.
Fantastic.
Anything else you'd like to shout out before we wrap up?
No, I just would say looking forward to reporting back to you in the end of or the middle of 2025, hopefully. So we'll see how that works.
We'll do a post-session recap and see how everything landed. I know you'll be busy for the next 6 months, as we'll be there watching and assisting. So yeah, thank you so much for your time and for coming on.
Thank you very much.
Thanks,
My pleasure.